That's at the national level. But also at the international level, we have an elected ProLinova oversight group with people coming from the country platforms, but also external independent people that, for example, you saw Scott Killo from World Neighbours. He's a member of the ProLinova oversight group, the governing body. Facilitation support is being provided by the International Support Team, which is composed of ETC Foundation, that's the organization I come from, the International Institute for Rural Reconstruction in the Philippines, and also IED Afrique, that's the Innovation Environnement Développement Afrique in Senegal. And they're working mainly with the Francophone countries in this network. We have a mosaic of funding. It's a very difficult process to get funding together from internal and external sources. But past and present funders have included the Netherlands and the French government, Rockefeller Foundation, International Fund for Agricultural Development, CTA, that's from the EU, German church organizations, the Protestant and the Catholic, Oxfam, DFID, World Bank, and a considerable amount of partners' own contributions. When we add it all up together, it comes to about a third of the total amount of funds that are being used in these activities. So one of the major and the first activities is recognition of local innovation. And there has been several hundred inspiring local innovations which have been identified, have been documented by different stakeholders, including farmer-led documentation. And then through participatory assessment, many, indeed most of these local innovations have been selected by the communities for further spreading through village workshops or farmer-to-farmer visits, innovation fairs, innovation catalogs, posters, magazines, photos, pamphlets, also community radio, video films, and also some television, mass media. And a small number of these innovations are selected for further joint experimentation, which is led by farmers. Now, this farmer-led joint experimentation are on farmer-chosen topics, and this gives you just some of the examples. A salt lick for cattle using local minerals in Ghana. Low-cost underground drainage of waterlogged fields in Ethiopia. Termite control using local predators in Uganda. New ways of managing soil fertility using organic matter in Cambodia. You saw the example of the traditional ovens to dry fish in the film. Also trapping wasps that hinder beekeeping in Nepal, and all sorts of experimentation going on about herbal treatments for pest control in crops and in animals. And you see in this picture here an Ethiopian woman who is comparing her local modern beehive made of local materials, which she developed herself, and comparing it with the introduced ones, which are much more expensive. And there's other advantages of the local one, which the farmers found out in their experimentation. Now, we still found, however, that in this farmer-led experimentation, that often as soon as the researchers came in as partners into this, the researchers tended to sort of take things over and tended to ask their questions rather than it being the farmers' questions. And indeed, generally in the world of agricultural research for development, even in those organizations that are talking about doing participatory agricultural research for development, it still tends to be a kind of technology transfer kind of mode that, researchers will bring in their ideas for farmers to test on farm experimentation. There are some new funding mechanisms emerging, competitive funds for participatory research, but the funding still tends to be in the researchers' control. And so the ProLinova partners at one of our international meetings decided that we should try out, experiment with some other way of channeling agricultural research for development funding, which would change the power balance so that the farmers are calling the tune. That they are deciding on the use of the funds. So that's why we got started in exploring a complementary form of funding mechanism so that farmers can decide what will be researched and how it will be done and who will be involved in doing it. And this is farmer-led participatory agricultural research for development. And this is meant to make this more accountable to and more relevant for smallholder farmers. And we were trying to develop and to test and to change and adapt through our own learning models for farmer-governed agricultural research for development that could be scaled up. Now these we called Local Innovation Support Funds, LISFs. And actually the framework in which we were piloting this we called FAIR, Farmer Access to Innovation Resources. And this was with the support of the Netherlands and French governments and also Rockefeller Foundation. And it has been piloted by PolyNova partners in 8 of the 20 countries. They decided themselves which one wanted to be involved and which ones felt that they weren't really at that stage or they weren't so interested in doing it. The objectives are to design and to set up sustainable, decentralized funding mechanisms to promote farmer-led agricultural research for development, to evaluate, to document, and to share experiences so as to learn how these LISFs could effectively promote farmer-led innovation, and to identify what kind of conditions are necessary for this. This is necessary for the policy dialogue, which is accompanying this. So our main questions in the action learning were, can funds for experimentation and learning be effectively and efficiently channeled through smallholders? And can this approach improve their livelihoods and their influence on mainstream agricultural research for development? We don't want to restart now. So, how does an LISF work? The multi-stakeholder team in the PolyNova country platform coordinates the piloting of the LISF. Each team developed their own guidelines for the grant management process. And they set up and built the capacity of local fund management committees. And these fund management committees put out open calls for proposals, which farmers can submit proposals, sometimes in written form, 1 or 2 pages, just basically what they intend to do, sometimes in oral form if they feel not comfortable in trying to write it. The fund management committees use their criteria, which they've developed themselves, to select the grantees and provide the resources. The farmers lead the joint research. The farmer researchers share the results. And the multi-stakeholder team is facilitating participatory monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessment. Now, although each of the fund management committees were developing their own criteria, probably because they were all somehow related within the PolyNova family, they had fairly similar screening criteria that they ended up coming up with. They were screening for an idea that was driven by the applicant or the applicants, could be a group. The innovation that the farmer or farmers wanted to work on appears to be sound in economic, environmental, and social terms. It can be applied by the resource poor. The applicants must be willing to share their results. If they're getting funds, public funds from this LISF, then they should be producing public goods which they're sharing with others. And the proposal is meant to be for experimentation and learning and not for farm investment. So this is quite different from a number of other funds that had been tried out previously, which is more for private goods. Now, the focus, of course, if we're doing piloting, action research, we have to have a large focus on monitoring and evaluation. And this allowed for multiple levels of learning. There was learning at the community, magnitude. Most of the funds were actually allocated for farmers' own experimentation without other stakeholders involved. The next category was improving farmers' innovations. It wasn't necessarily sort of an experiment as such. The next category was farmer-led experimentation together with other stakeholders, with research and extension staff. And the fourth category for which they made funds available were learning visits by farmers to other farmers, but also sometimes even to a research center. Now it evolved. There were 2 ways of managing LISFs because each of the country platforms worked it out the way they felt was best for their country. There was one mode which was the more centralized multi-stakeholder committee, which involved the key partner organizations and farmer representatives. This actually allowed for more interactive learning and experimentation. There was stronger quality control in the screening and also in the implementation. But there was a slower process in getting the grants approved and getting the funds out. There were relatively high operational costs, and there was actually, compared to the second, which you'll see in a moment, less influence of farmers in decision making. The second way of managing local innovation support funds was decentralized farmer-managed committees. And these were purely farmers and from the community. There was less involvement of other actors in the research that they funded. There was weaker quality control. There was much faster processing of the grant applications. There were smaller grants. And they didn't pay for sort of travel costs for external expertise to come in and to support them. There were lower operational costs, and they were more accessible for smallholders. Now, I don't have really the time to go through this, but it gives just an example of the way the fund mechanism in one particular was a local NGO that was working together with the Fund Management Committee in Ambo, and the Fund Management Committee decided, they were farmers, decided to subdivide into 5 different groupings in subsections of the district, and each had their own sort of Fund Management Committee, which did a kind of pre-screening of the proposals that were coming from the farmers, and then the Fund Management Committee had a representative from each of those 5 groupings that then made the final decision about to which groups the funds would go for what type of research. Now, we did participatory impact assessment, and we found that the involvement of the different actors in these LISF pilots helped to strengthen farmer self-organization around managing local research and handling their own innovation and learning funds. It helped to build smallholders' capacities to formulate their own needs and to access relevant information. It helped to increase smallholders' confidence to interact with outsiders in joint innovation. For example, here you have in the white, with the cap on this side, a farmer innovator explaining to people from the Ministry of Agriculture the experiment that he's carrying out. And it also stimulated the interest of many development agents and some scientists to recognize and support farmer-led innovation. There were challenges, and there are challenges. We have found it difficult to generate in-country funding for this. Some of the fund management committees have tried partial repayment of the grants, even with interest. But on the other hand, they're saying it should be public funds for local learning and producing public goods, and if the researchers in the research centers don't have to repay when they get funds for doing research, why should farmers doing research on behalf of the community have to repay? There are still quite high transaction costs during this piloting phase. We're finding that of the total budget that is made available, only about 30 to 40% of the budget is actually going to the funds that the farmers are allocating, and the rest is going to all of this facilitating and learning and monitoring and evaluation, etc. And the advisory support for the local experimentation. We have also found, now that's blocked out to say that we had a lot of difficulty involving researchers with a capital R. All sorts of researchers, farmer researchers, but formal research was more difficult to involve. And it was partly the farmers themselves that were making those decisions. They initially wanted to experiment on their own and using local advice. And it was partly because the research institutions had their own agenda and they had little room to support initiatives that were coming from farmers that didn't fit into their agenda. And this is not a challenge, this is actually something that was very positive, is that we found that the greatest interest was being shown by the rural advisors, the development agents, the extension agents who were exposed to LISFs. So some of the findings and the lessons learned. We did find that funds for locally relevant agriculture research and development can be handled locally, that the LISF needs to be custom designed depending on local capacities, on the degree of organization, especially the degree of farmer organization, and the availability of support services. It certainly cannot stand alone. It works best when it's incorporated into an existing participatory program that can give the needed support. And the involvement in the LASF can indeed enhance the role of smallholders in governance of publicly funded agricultural research and development. So the outlook, the policy implications. We feel that some promising steps towards complementary funding mechanism have been made that give farmers direct access to funds for innovation according to their own priorities. However, the LIS need to be better linked into the regular agricultural research for development and extension programs, and organizations have to encourage them to create more space for farmer-led experimentation. Now the country platforms that are involved in this are trying to consolidate what they feel are the most feasible models for each country and working out the best way to upscale them, but still retaining the smallholder focus and the farmer-led character. They've come up with various scenarios, and that's where we are right now. They are exploring these different scenarios and different ones in different countries. One of them is establishing an LASF within a national farmer organization. That's what's happening in Cambodia. One is integration into the local government administration, very much at the local level, and this is happening now in Tanzania. One is integration into the Ministry of Agricultural Extension Service. To some extent, at least they're trying to do this within Ethiopia. One is integration into the government research, the national or subnational. All of them are trying to do a little bit of this, but are not too sure how promising this will be because of the experiences in the past thus far with the research, formal research. The establishment of a national innovation fund as a new legal entity. I mean, this is what they're doing in Nepal. And also working with self-managed and self-resourced CBOs working right at the local level and trying to find ways of generating funds at that level. This is what Uganda is trying to explore. And all of them are trying to do this towards the vision of a world in which women and men farmers play decisive roles in research and development for sustainable life.